Imagine walking into a bank. You hand over your ID, fill out a few forms, and a few clicks later, the bank creates $10,000 out of thin air and hands it to you. No vault, no gold, no magic trick. Just numbers on a screen. Now, imagine that every time this happens, the entire economy subtly shifts. Prices move, markets ripple, governments adjust policies, but almost nobody notices. You think credit is just lending, but really, it's the quiet engine that drives modern money. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how it works. You might think, why should I care about bank lending? I just want to buy my house, pay my bills, survive. But here's the thing. The rules of credit expansion shape the cost of everything: houses, groceries, even the stability of entire economies. Right now, central banks are experimenting with record-low interest rates. Governments borrow more than ever. Debt levels are climbing. And behind the headlines, the mechanism that makes all of this possible is quietly working, amplifying risks most people never see. Understanding this is like discovering the hidden gears in a clock. Once you see them, you start noticing the patterns, the tensions, and the weak points. Let's break it down. Banks don't lend out money they already have. That's the story you probably learned in school. Wrong. When you take out a loan, the bank creates new deposits in your account. That's it. No physical cash moves. No gold bars sliding across a counter. Just a digital balance that didn't exist a second ago. Think about it. The bank's balance sheet grows. Your account balance grows. The money supply grows. And the bank collects interest on the new money it just invented. Multiply that by thousands of loans, millions of transactions over decades, and you start to see how economies quietly expand credit almost invisibly. But here's the kicker: banks can't create unlimited credit. They are constrained by regulatory requirements, risk assessments, and market trust. That invisible boundary is where most people miss the drama. When credit grows steadily, it fuels growth. Businesses expand, consumers spend, asset prices climb. But push too far, and the very engine that created prosperity starts to amplify risk, making the economy more sensitive to shocks that would have been minor before. The first subtle irony is that credit expansion feels ordinary. You take out a mortgage, a company borrows to build a factory, a student gets a loan for college. All completely routine. Yet, collectively, these tiny acts of money creation can inflate entire markets, sometimes beyond sustainable limits. Housing bubbles, corporate debt surges, and even national debt crises often begin with these quiet, almost invisible steps. Now consider the math behind it. Suppose a bank has $1 billion in reserves. Through fractional reserve banking, it can lend out multiples of that amount, $10 billion, maybe $20 billion. Each new loan creates deposits elsewhere, which can be lent again, creating a ripple effect. What starts as $1 billion can expand to trillions in the system, depending on how confident banks and borrowers feel. It's a mechanism so simple yet so powerful that few people truly grasp its magnitude. And it's not just banks. Central banks influence this process by adjusting interest rates, reserve requirements, and other tools. A small tweak in rates can encourage banks to lend more aggressively or more cautiously. What seems like a technical policy decision can, in reality, steer billions of dollars of newly created credit into specific markets, subtly shaping economic outcomes before anyone notices. There's also a human dimension. Banks and borrowers operate on trust, optimism, and expectations. When confidence is high, credit expands faster. People buy bigger houses, companies invest in riskier ventures, and governments borrow more freely. But when confidence falters, credit contracts, and the same system that fueled growth now accelerates declines. It's a quiet, almost invisible tension that defines every boom and bust. Here's an uncomfortable truth. This system inherently favors those already close to the money. Credit creation flows more easily to well-connected borrowers, established markets, and countries with stable institutions. Meanwhile, small players or unstable economies often face tighter constraints, which amplifies inequality and risk. The mechanism of credit expansion isn't neutral. It subtly redistributes power while appearing perfectly ordinary. Irony shows up in another way. Banks, Regulators and central bankers often celebrate growth without fully acknowledging the fragility they create. A system that rewards optimism also punishes overconfidence. Tiny miscalculations, like underestimating risk in mortgage-backed securities or sovereign debt, can cascade through the economy like a chain reaction. What feels like stability is often just a delicate balance held together by trust in the system. To see the stakes clearly, zoom out. Globally, trillions of dollars of credit flow daily. Decisions in New York, London, or Tokyo echo in emerging markets thousands of miles away. A sudden contraction in one part of the system can trigger shocks everywhere else. Credit expansion isn't just local. It's a global mechanism that quietly links fortunes, economies, and even political stability. At the individual level, it feels abstract. But when you realize that your mortgage, student loan, or even paycheck is part of this vast network, it becomes tangible. Credit expansion determines who gets opportunities, who bears risk, and even how governments plan for the future. It's invisible, yet it touches every financial decision you make. And here's the final paradox. The system is designed to work smoothly, but its success depends on everyone behaving rationally. Yet humans rarely behave perfectly rationally. Optimism turns to overconfidence. Risk turns into speculation, and suddenly, the quiet mechanism that supports growth can become a force of instability. Crises rarely begin with dramatic events. They begin with tiny, incremental credit decisions that, in aggregate, spiral beyond control. So, what's the takeaway? Credit expansion is not magic, and it's not just about lending. It's a quiet, powerful engine that shapes wealth, power, and economic outcomes worldwide. Understanding it doesn't give you control, but it gives perspective. An awareness of the hidden forces at work behind every boom, every bubble, and every crash. And maybe that's the most important lesson. The system works silently, almost invisibly, until it doesn't. The next time someone mentions debt, interest rates, or a government stimulus, remember, these are not just numbers. They are part of a quiet mechanism with the power to lift economies or unravel them, and almost no one sees it coming. The uncomfortable question lingers. As credit continues to expand in ways we barely understand, how much longer can the system keep running quietly before the consequences become impossible to ignore?